She was just the maid, hired to scrub floors and keep her head down to pay off a debt she didn't owe. He was Lucian Blackwood, the most feared man in New York, a man who didn't tolerate disobedience. But the night Isla stepped out of her room, not in her uniform, but in a blood-red gown that clung to every curve, the rules of the game changed instantly. "Where are you going dressed like that?" he snapped, his voice like thunder. He thought she was going on a date. He had no idea she was walking straight into a trap to save his life. This isn't just a romance, it's a war for survival. Stay tuned, because you won't believe who Isla really is. The penthouse apartment on the 45th floor of the Sterling Tower in Manhattan was less of a home and more of a fortress. It was cold, sterile, and terrified everyone who entered it, much like its owner, Lucian Blackwood. Isla Bennett adjusted her apron, wincing as the stiff fabric rubbed against the bruise on her shoulder. She had earned that bruise yesterday when she'd tripped over a rug while carrying a tray of crystal decanters. Lucian hadn't yelled. He had simply stared at her with those icy grey eyes, a look that was somehow worse than screaming. "Clean it up," he had said, stepping over the shattered glass without breaking his stride, "and take the cost out of your wages." Isla scrubbed the marble counter of the kitchen island now, the smell of lemon polish stinging her nose. She was 23, with a degree in finance that was currently gathering dust, and she was scrubbing floors for a mob boss because her father, a gambling addict named Robert Bennett, had borrowed $200,000 from the Blackwood Syndicate and then vanished into thin air. Isla had taken his place. It was either this or face the alternative, and in Lucian Blackwood's world, the alternative usually involved the East River and a pair of concrete shoes. "Isla." The deep voice rumbled through the open-plan living room, making her jump. She turned to see Lucian standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the rain-soaked city. He was wearing a charcoal three-piece suit, tailored to perfection, his dark hair slicked back. He looked like a prince of darkness. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood?" she asked, keeping her eyes lowered. "I'm going out. Do not enter my study. I'm expecting a call on the secure line, and the recording equipment is sensitive." "Yes, sir," she murmured. He paused, his hand on the doorknob. He turned slightly, his gaze sweeping over her baggy grey uniform and the messy bun on top of her head. For a second, something flickered in his eyes. Disdain? Curiosity? It was gone too fast to tell. "And lock the doors. The city is restless tonight." With the click of the heavy oak door, he was gone. Isla let out a breath she felt she'd been holding all day. She waited 2 minutes, counting the seconds, before she rushed to her small quarters off the kitchen. She fell to her knees and pulled a loose floorboard up from under her bed. Inside wasn't jewelry or money. It was a phone. A burner phone she wasn't supposed to have. It buzzed with a text message. "Tonight, the St. Regis Gala, 9 p.m. If you want to know where your father is, be there. Wear red." Isla's heart hammered against her ribs. It had been 6 months since her father disappeared. Lucian claimed he had run away, but Isla knew her father. He was weak, yes, but he wouldn't leave her behind to pay his debts unless he was forced to, or unless he was dead. The text was from an unknown number. It could be a trap. It probably was a trap. But it was the first lead she'd had in half a year. She checked the clock. 7:30 p.m. Lucian was gone for the night. He usually spent his Friday evenings at the high-stakes poker game at the Underground Club. She had a window, but she had nothing to wear. The text was specific. Wear red. Isla thought of the walk-in closet in the guest wing. Lucian often had guests, models, actresses, daughters of diplomats, who stayed over. Sometimes they left things behind. She knew it was stealing. She knew if Lucian caught her, the debt would be the least of her worries. But desperation made people do reckless things. Isla crept into the guest wing. The closet smelled of cedar and expensive perfume. In the back, covered in plastic, hung a dress that looked like it had been spun from fire. It was a deep crimson silk, backless, with a slit that ran up to the thigh. It still had the tag on it, Dior. She stripped off her uniform, the symbol of her servitude, and slipped into the silk. It fit as if it had been made for her. She let her hair down, waves of chestnut cascading over her bare shoulders, and applied a tube of red lipstick she found in the vanity drawer. Looking in the mirror, the tired maid was gone. Staring back was a woman who looked dangerous. A woman who belonged in Lucian Blackwood's world, not serving in it. She grabbed a small clutch, hid her burner phone inside, and headed for the private elevator. Her heart was in her throat. If she could just get to the St. Regis, meet the contact, and get back before midnight, Lucian would never know. The elevator doors pinged open. Isla stepped out into the foyer, her heels clicking on the marble. She reached for the front door handle. "Going somewhere?" The voice didn't come from behind her. It came from the shadows of the living room. Isla froze. Her blood turned to ice. A lamp clicked on. Lucian was sitting in the high-backed leather armchair, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He hadn't gone out. He had been waiting. He stood up slowly, the glass tilting dangerously in his hand. His eyes travelled from her silver heels up the long slit of the red dress over the curve of her waist, and settled on her face. His expression wasn't just angry, it was thunderous. "Where are you going dressed like that?" Lucian snapped, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. Isla turned to face him, her hands trembling. "I have a personal matter." "A personal matter?" He took a step closer, the scent of expensive scotch and danger rolling off him. "You are my employee, Isla. You live here, you work here. You don't have personal matters outside of this apartment unless I authorize them." "I'm off the clock," she lied, lifting her chin. "You are never off the clock until your father's debt is paid," he growled. He was close now, towering over her. He reached out, his fingers hovering inches from the bare skin of her arm, but he didn't touch her. "Who is he?" "Who?" "The man you're dressing up for. You didn't put on a $5,000 Dior gown to visit a sick aunt. You're meeting a man." Isla's mind raced. If she told him she was meeting a stranger about her father, he would lock her in her room. Lucian hated loose ends, and her father was a loose end. "It's none of your business," she whispered. Lucian's jaw tightened. He slammed the whiskey glass down on the console table, the sound like a gunshot. "Everything you do is my business. You are under my protection. If you walk out that door looking like that, you are walking into a shark tank. Do you have any idea what men in this city do to women who look like you?" "I can take care of myself. You can't even carry a tray without tripping," he shot back ruthlessly. "Go back to your room. Take that off." "No." The silence that followed was deafening. No one said no to Lucian Blackwood. "I have to go," Isla said, her voice shaking but firm. "I'll be back by midnight." She turned to the door. "Isla!" he roared. She ignored him and grabbed the handle. "If you open that door," Lucian said, his voice dropping to a lethal calm, "I will not be responsible for what happens to the man you are meeting." Isla hesitated. She looked back at him. "Good. Because the man I'm meeting might be the only one who can tell me why you're lying about my father." She pulled the door open and ran. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets of Manhattan slick and reflecting the neon lights like black mirrors. Isla didn't take a taxi. She couldn't risk Lucian tracking the credit card connected to the house account. Instead, she used the last $40 of cash she had stashed away to hail a yellow cab. "The St. Regis," she told the driver. Her hands were shaking in her lap. She had defied Lucian Blackwood. The realization made her nauseous. He wasn't just a boss. He was the head of the Blackwood Syndicate, a man who had FBI agents on his payroll and politicians in his pocket. Defying him was usually a death sentence, but the text about her father had overridden her fear. The St. Regis Hotel was glowing with golden light. A line of black limousines and Rolls-Royces snaked around the block. Paparazzi flashed bulbs like strobe lights. It was the annual charity gala for the Children's Hospital, a convenient cover for the city's elite to launder money and shake hands with devils. Ela smoothed the red silk over her hips. She had no invitation, but she knew the service entrance. She had worked catering gigs before her father's debt ruined her life. She slipped around the side of the building, dodging the valet staff. The service door was propped open with a crate of champagne. She waited for a waiter to pass, then slipped inside, grabbing a masquerade mask from a discarded prop table near the coat check. She put the mask on. Now she was just another mysterious woman in a red dress. The ballroom was suffocatingly warm, smelling of lilies and roasted duck. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner. Ela scanned the room, her heart pounding. Wear red. Be there. Who was she looking for? She moved through the crowd, dodging men in tuxedos who turned to stare at her. The dress was doing its job, perhaps too well. Champagne? A waiter offered. Ela shook her head, her eyes darting around. Then her phone buzzed in her clutch. Balcony. Now. She looked towards the French doors draped in velvet curtains. She pushed through the crowd and stepped out into the cool night air. The balcony was empty, save for a man standing in the shadows, smoking a cigar. He turned as the door clicked shut. He wasn't her father. He was older, with silver hair and a scar running down his cheek. He wore a white tuxedo that stood out starkly against the night. Ela recognized him instantly from the news, and from Lucian's files she had once glimpsed while cleaning. Victor Rossi, the head of the Rossi crime family. Lucian's sworn enemy. "You must be the daughter," Rossi said, his voice like gravel. He took a drag of his cigar. "You have Robert's eyes. Pity he didn't give you his common sense." "Where is he?" Ela demanded, stepping forward. "You said you knew where my father was." Rossi chuckled darkly. "I do. He's in a very safe place. A place he can't leave unless I say so. Just like you." Ela backed up, reaching for the door handle. "I'm leaving." "I don't think so." Two men stepped out from the shadows on either side of the balcony. They were massive, wearing ill-fitting suits that barely concealed the holsters beneath their jackets. "You see, Ela," Rossi said, flicking ash onto the stone railing, "your father didn't just owe money to Blackwood. He owed money to me, too. But Blackwood, he has something I want. He has the shipping routes in the harbor. He refuses to share." "What does that have to do with me?" Ila's voice trembled. "Lucian has a weakness. He claims he doesn't, but he does. He's possessive. He protects what is his." Rossi smiled, a shark baring its teeth. "I heard he took you in, keeping you in his penthouse, protecting you." "I'm his maid," Ila spat. "He hates me." "Does he?" Rossi took a step closer. "Then why is he storming through the lobby of this hotel right now, assaulting my security guards?" Ila's breath hitched. "Lucian was here?" "I brought you here as bait, my dear," Rossi whispered, "and the shark has arrived." Suddenly the balcony doors exploded inward. Glass shattered across the stone floor. Lucian Blackwood stood in the frame. He looked terrifying. His tie was gone, his collar unbuttoned, and his knuckles were bloody. He held a silver pistol in his right hand, leveled directly at Rossi's chest. "Let her go, Victor," Lucian said. His voice was calm, but it was the calm before a tsunami. "Lucian!" Rossi spread his arms wide, grinning. "So nice of you to join us. I was just telling little Isla here how much you care." Ila stood frozen between the two men. She looked at Lucian. He wasn't looking at Rossi. He was looking at her, his eyes scanning her for injuries. When he saw she was unharmed, his gaze hardened again. "Come here, Ila," Lucian commanded. "And now!" She took a step toward him, but one of Rossi's guards grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back. Ila cried out in pain. Lucian's composure snapped. He fired. The shot was deafening. The guard holding Isla screamed and released her, clutching his shoulder. "Kill him!" Rossi shouted, ducking behind a stone pillar. Chaos erupted. The ballroom inside screamed as the sound of gunfire reached the guests. Lucien didn't take cover. He surged forward, grabbing Isla by the waist and pulling her behind a heavy concrete planter, just as bullets chipped away the stone where she had been standing. He pressed her against the wall, his body shielding hers. He was breathing hard, the smell of gunpowder and his unique cologne filling her senses. "I told you," Lucien hissed, his face inches from hers, "not to open that damn door." "He has my father," Isla cried, tears streaming down her face. "Rossi said he has my father. Rossi is a liar." Lucien reloaded his magazine with practiced speed. "He's using you to get to me. If I hadn't put a tracker in your phone, you'd be dead already. You tracked me?" "I track everything I own," he said darkly. He looked at her, his eyes blazing. "And right now, that includes you." Bullets whizzed over their heads. "We have to jump," Lucien said, looking over the edge of the balcony. Below them was a terrace, about 10 feet down. "I can't, in these heels. Take them off," he ordered. He grabbed her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. His grip was iron tight. "Do you trust me?" "No," Isla said honestly. Lucien smirked, a dangerous, beautiful expression in the chaos. "Smart girl. Jump anyway." He pulled her over the edge. The fall was terrifying, a rush of wind and gravity that ended abruptly in a patch of decorative ivy and wet earth. Isla hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of her lungs. Before she could even register the pain in her ankles, Lucien was pulling her up. "Move," he commanded, his voice tight with adrenaline. He didn't give her time to think. He dragged her through the shadows of the hotel terrace, bypassing the main exits. They scrambled over a wrought iron fence, the expensive Dior silk tearing audibly on a spike. Isla gasped, not for the dress, but for the sheer reality of the nightmare she was living. A black SUV idled in the back alley, engine purring like a sleeping beast. Lucien shoved her into the passenger seat and vaulted into the driver's side. He didn't even check for a key. He punched a button on the dashboard, and the car roared to life, tires screeching against the wet asphalt as they peeled away just as shouting erupted from the hotel gates behind them. Isla sat trembling, her hands gripping the leather dashboard. The rain was coming down harder now, hammering against the roof of the car. The city lights blurred into streaks of red and gold, a dizzying kaleidoscope of color that matched the chaos in her mind. "You're bleeding," Lucien said roughly. He didn't take his eyes off the road, weaving through traffic with terrifying precision. Isla looked down. A jagged cut ran along her forearm, likely from the fall or the fence. Blood was dripping onto the red silk, blending in perfectly. "It's fine. It doesn't matter." "It matters," he growled. He made a sharp left, heading towards the Brooklyn Bridge. "Because you are my responsibility." "Is that all I am?" Isla snapped, the fear momentarily replaced by a surge of anger. "A liability? A line item in your ledger?" Lucien slammed his hand on the steering wheel, making her flinch. "You have no idea what you just walked into, Isla. Victor Rossi isn't just a rival. He is a butcher. If I hadn't been there, if you hadn't been there, I might have gotten answers about my father. If I hadn't been there, you would be dead." Lucien cut her off, his voice dropping to that lethal, quiet tone that was far scarier than his shouting. "Rossi doesn't give answers. He trades in pain. He would have tortured you until you told him everything you knew about my operation. And when he realized you knew nothing, he would have sent you back to me in pieces." Isla fell silent, the horror of his words sinking in. She looked at his profile, the sharp jawline, the intense focus in his grey eyes. He was a monster, yes, but tonight he was the monster who had stood between her and death. They didn't go back to the penthouse. Lucien drove for an hour, deep into the wooded outskirts of upstate New York, pulling up a long gravel driveway to a secluded modernist cabin made of glass and steel. "Get inside," he ordered, killing the engine. The interior was cold and smelled of stale air, as if no one had been there in months. Lucien flipped a switch, and warm amber lights flooded the space. He went straight to a cabinet in the kitchen, pulling out a first aid kit and a bottle of bourbon. "Sit," he pointed to the kitchen island. Isla obeyed, hopping up onto the counter. The red dress was ruined, mud-stained, torn and soaked. She felt ridiculous and exposed. Lucian stepped between her legs, the intimacy of the position making her breath hitch. He wasn't looking at her face. He was focused on her arm. He poured bourbon onto a cloth and pressed it to the wound. Isla hissed in pain. "That stings." "Pain keeps you awake," he muttered. He began to clean the cut with surprising gentleness. His large hands, usually so prone to violence, were steady and careful. "Why did you do it, Isla? Why did you listen to him?" "Because he said he had my father," she whispered, watching him work. "Lucian, please, just tell me the truth. Is my father dead?" Lucian stopped. He wrapped a bandage around her arm, securing it with a metal clip. Then he looked up, his grey eyes locking onto hers. For the first time, she saw exhaustion there. "Robert isn't dead," Lucian said, his voice heavy. "But sometimes, death is better than the truth." "What does that mean?" Lucian stepped back, putting distance between them. He poured himself a drink and downed it in one swallow. "Your father didn't just borrow money, Isla. He stole something that belongs to the families. Information. Encryption keys for the entire underground banking network." Isla shook her head. "No, my dad is a gambler, not a tech genius. He barely knows how to use a smartphone." "That's what he wanted you to think," Lucian said, turning to face her. "He stole the drive, and then he sold it to the highest bidder. But he got greedy. He tried to sell it to both me and Rossi. When the deal went south, he vanished." "So, I'm collateral?" Isla asked, her voice trembling. "You kept me as a maid to pay off a debt that doesn't exist?" "I kept you," Lucian said, walking toward her until he was inches away again. "Because as long as you are under my roof, Rossi can't touch you. And as long as Rossi thinks I have you as leverage, he won't kill your father. You are the only thing keeping Robert Bennett alive." Isla stared at him. The narrative she had built in her head, of Lucian the tyrant and her father the victim, was crumbling. "You were protecting me?" "I was protecting my investment," Lucian corrected, though his eyes betrayed him. He reached out, his thumb grazing her cheekbone, wiping away a smear of dirt. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through her. "And tonight, you nearly destroyed everything by wearing that dress." "You didn't seem to hate the dress," she challenged, her heart pounding. Lucian's gaze dropped to her lips, then down the curve of her neck to where the red silk clung to her chest. The air in the room grew thick, charged with a tension that had been building for months. "I hate the dress," Lucian murmured, his voice rough, "because it makes every other man in the room look at you, and I don't like sharing." Before Isla could respond, he turned and walked away towards the bedrooms. "Sleep. Tomorrow, the war begins." "And Isla?" She looked up. "Burn the dress." Isla didn't burn the dress. She folded it carefully and hid it under the mattress of the guest bed. It was a reminder of the night she stopped being invisible. The next morning, the sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Isla woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. It was disorienting. Usually she was the one cooking. She walked out into the living area wearing one of Lucian's button-down shirts she had found in the closet. It hung to her knees, swallowing her frame. Lucian was at the kitchen table, his laptop open, a phone pressed to his ear. He was back in his suit, though he had discarded the jacket. His gun sat on the table next to his coffee mug. "I don't care how many men Rossi has," Lucian was saying into the phone. "Find out who leaked the location of the gala. We have a rat, Cole, and I want his head on a spike." He hung up and looked at Isla. His eyes swept over his shirt on her body, and he cleared his throat, shifting in his chair. "Sit, eat." He gestured to a plate of eggs. "I'm not hungry. Eat," he ordered. You'll need the energy. We're leaving in an hour." "Where are we going?" Isla sat down, picking at the toast. "A secure location in the Hamptons. This place is compromised. Rossi's men were spotted 2 towns over." Isla froze. "How did they find us so fast?" "That," Lucian said darkly, "is the million-dollar question." Suddenly the front door burst open. Isla screamed, diving under the table. Lucian was on his feet in a split second, gun raised, but the man who entered held his hands up. "Easy, boss. It's me." It was a tall man with a shaved head and tattoos creeping up his neck. This was Cole, Lucian's head of security and most trusted lieutenant. He looked winded. "Code Red, Lucian," Cole panted. "They aren't 2 towns over. They're at the bottom of the driveway." Lucian cursed. He grabbed Isla's arm, hauling her out from under the table. "Go, out the back, now!" "What about you?" Isla cried. "I'll buy us time." "No!" Isla grabbed his hand. "I'm not leaving you. This isn't a debate, Isla." Lucian shoved her towards the back door. "Cole, get her to the chopper at the rendezvous point." "Lucian, there's too many of them," Cole argued. "Go!" Cole grabbed Isla around the waist and dragged her out the back door, just as the front window shattered, bullets spraying the kitchen where they had been standing seconds ago. They ran into the woods. The ground was wet and slippery. Isla could hear the gunfire erupting behind them, the rhythmic pop-pop-pop of handguns and the deeper boom of a shotgun. Lucian was back there, fighting an army alone. "We have to go back," Isla struggled against Cole's grip. "Boss gave an order," Cole grunted, pushing her forward. "If you die, he dies. That's how this works." They reached a clearing where a small, sleek helicopter was waiting, its rotors already spinning. Cole practically threw her inside. As they lifted off, Isla pressed her face against the glass. Down below, the cabin was surrounded. Smoke was billowing from the windows. She saw a figure run out the back door, firing 2 guns simultaneously, moving with the grace of a panther. He dove behind a stack of logs as the cabin exploded, a fireball consuming the structure. "Lucian!" she screamed, though he couldn't hear her. Cole looked grim as he piloted the chopper away. "He's tough, kid. I've seen him survive worse." "He didn't get out," Isla sobbed, watching the black smoke rise into the grey sky. "I saw him." "The explosion." "Look closely," Cole pointed. Isla squinted through her tears. At the edge of the tree line, far from the inferno, a black shape was moving. It was running toward the secondary extraction point. He was alive. They flew in silence for 30 minutes, landing on the roof of a private high-rise in Jersey City. This was another safe house, one Isla had never heard of. When they got inside the penthouse, Ayla collapsed onto the sofa. Her nerves were fried. She sat there for an hour, staring at the wall, until the elevator pinged. Lucian walked in. He was covered in soot, his white shirt stained with blood and ash, his face smeared with grime. He looked like he had walked through hell. Isla didn't think. She didn't care about the debt, the maid uniform, or the rules. She ran to him and threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his ruined shirt. Lucian went rigid for a moment, shocked. Then slowly his arms came up around her, crushing her against him. He buried his nose in her hair, inhaling deeply. "I thought you were dead," she muffled against his chest. "I told you," he rasped, his voice rougher than usual. "I don't die easy." He pulled back, his hands framing her face. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a raw, exposed vulnerability between them. "Are you hurt?" "No," she shook her head. "Lucian, the explosion. Who set it?" Lucian's face hardened. He looked over Isla's shoulder at Cole. "It wasn't Rossi," Lucian said. "Rossi's men used submachine guns. The explosion, that was C4, military grade." "So?" Isla asked. "So," Lucian said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "It was charred at the edges. I found this on the body of one of the men I took down. It's a contract." He handed it to Isla. She smoothed it out, her hands shaking. It was a hit order. Target, Lucian Blackwood. Payment, the Ledger Drive. But it was the signature at the bottom that made Isla's world stop spinning. It wasn't Victor Rossi's signature. It was signed R. Bennett. "No," Isla whispered, backing away. "No, that's impossible. It's your father, Isla," Lucian said softly, though his eyes were cold as ice. "Your father didn't just sell the drive. He's trying to kill me to get it back, so he can sell it again. He isn't a victim. He's the villain." Isla spent the next 2 days in a state of numbness. The realization that her father, the man who used to read her bedtime stories, the man she had scrubbed floors to save, was a cold-blooded killer who had ordered a hit on the man protecting her. It broke something inside her. But it also built something new. A resolve. A fury. She was done being the victim. She was done being the maid. On the third morning, Lucian found her in the home gym of the Jersey City penthouse. She was punching the heavy bag, her knuckles raw, sweat dripping down her face. She was wearing a sports bra and leggings that she had ordered online with Cole's help. Lucian leaned against the doorframe, watching her. He had cleaned up, his bruises fading to yellow, but the tension in his shoulders remained. "You're punching with your wrist bent," he said. "You'll break it." Isla stopped, breathing hard. She didn't look at him. "Teach me." "Teach you what?" "To fight, to shoot, to not be useless." She turned to him, her eyes burning. "If my father is the monster you say he is, then I'm the only one who can get close to him without him suspecting a trap. He thinks I'm his sweet, innocent daughter. He thinks I'm a pawn." Lucian walked over to her. He wrapped her hands properly with tape, his touch professional but electric. "You want to be bait?" "I want to be the hook," she corrected. "I know where he'll be. I remember." "What do you remember?" "Every year, on my mother's birthday, he goes to the same place, a private club in Atlantic City called the Sapphire. He's superstitious. He thinks if he gambles on that day, her spirit brings him luck." "That's in 2 days," Lucian calculated. "Exactly. We go there. We flush him out." Lucian studied her. He saw the change in her. The frightened girl who had tripped over the rug was gone. In her place was a woman forged in fire. "We can't just walk in," Lucian said. "The Sapphire is neutral ground, but it's heavily guarded. You can't go in as Isla Bennett. He'll spot you and run." "Then who do I go in as?" Lucian smirked, a wicked glint in his eye. "You go in as my fiancé. The future Mrs. Blackwood. We'll need to change your look. Blonde hair, maybe. Contacts. And—" He paused, looking her up and down, "a wardrobe that screams mob wife." "I can do that," Isla said. "Good, because if we do this, Isla, there is no going back. Once you step into the arena, you are a target forever." "I'm already a target," she replied. "I might as well be a dangerous one." 2 days later, Atlantic City. The Sapphire was a monument to excess. Crystal chandeliers, velvet walls, and the scent of money and desperation. A Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the valet. Lucian stepped out, looking devastating in a white tuxedo jacket. He walked around and opened the passenger door. A woman stepped out, but it wasn't the Isla anyone knew. Her hair was a platinum blonde bob, sharp and chic. She wore a dress made of black sequins that shimmered like oil, plunging dangerously low in the front. Diamonds, real ones, from Lucian's private vault, glittered at her throat and ears. She looked cold, expensive, and untouchable. Lucian offered his arm. "Ready, darling?" "Ready," she said, her voice steady. They swept into the casino. Heads turned. Whispers followed them. Lucian Blackwood. Who is she? Look at that ring. They moved to the high-stakes baccarat room, and there, sitting at the far table holding a glass of scotch, was a man Isla knew better than anyone, Robert Bennett. He looked older, thinner, but he was laughing. He was wearing a bespoke suit, looking nothing like a man in hiding. He looked like a king. Isla felt a surge of bile, but she choked it down. She tightened her grip on Lucian's arm. "He's there," she whispered. "I see him," Lucian murmured. Stick to the script. You are Sophia. You are Italian. You don't speak English well. Let me do the talking." They approached the table. Robert looked up. His eyes scanned Lucian with recognition and fear. Then they slid to Isla. He frowned. He stared at her for a long moment. Isla held her breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. Under the wig and the makeup, would he see his little girl? Robert's gaze lingered, then moved away, dismissing her. He didn't recognize her. He was too arrogant to look closely at a woman he assumed was just arm candy. "Mr. Blackwood," Robert said, his voice smooth, "to what do I owe the displeasure?" "You have something of mine, Robert," Lucian said, taking a seat opposite him. "And I've heard you're looking to sell it again. I'm here to make a counter-offer." "I don't do business with betrayers," Robert sneered. "Funny," Lucian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I was about to say the same thing, but I brought a gift to sweeten the deal." Lucian gestured to Isla. "My fiancée, Sophia, has a unique talent for numbers. She tells me the encryption key you stole is useless without the biometric pass, which coincidentally I have." Robert's eyes narrowed. He looked at Isla again. "Is that so?" "It is," Isla said, affecting a slight accent. She leaned forward, placing her hand on the green felt table. "And I think, Mr. Bennett, that you are bluffing. You don't have the drive here?" Robert laughed. "Smart girl." "No, the drive is safe. But if you want it, Lucian, you'll have to play for it." "Name the game," Lucian said. "Poker, no limit. If I win, you transfer 10 million into my offshore account and walk away. If you win, I take you to the drive." "And if you cheat?" Lucian asked. Robert smiled, a smile that Isla used to think was warm, but now looked predatory. "Then your beautiful fiancé pays the price." Lucian stiffened. Under the table, his hand found Isla's knee, squeezing reassuringly. "Deal," Lucian said. The dealer shuffled. The cards were dealt. Isla watched her father. She saw the tell, the slight twitch in his left eye when he had a bad hand. He had the same tell when he lied to her about paying the electric bill years ago. He had a bad hand now. But he was betting big. "All in," Robert said, pushing a mountain of chips forward. Lucian looked at his cards. Then he looked at Isla. She caught his eye and tapped her finger once on the table. "Their signal. He's bluffing." Lucian smiled. "Call." Robert turned over his cards. A pair of tens. Lucian flipped his. 3 kings. "I win," Lucian said coldly. Robert's face went purple. He stood up, knocking his chair back. "You cheated!" "Sit down, Robert," Lucian said calmly, "and tell me where the drive is." "I'm not telling you anything," Robert shouted. He snapped his fingers. Instantly, 6 men at the surrounding tables stood up, pulling guns from their jackets. The casino erupted in screams. "You think I came alone?" Robert spat. "Rossi lent me some friends." Lucian stood up, shielding Isla with his body. "You really are a fool, Robert." "Kill him," Robert ordered, "but keep the girl. She reminds me of someone." As the guards raised their weapons, Isla did something neither her father nor Lucian expected. She reached into a clutch, pulled out a small flashbang grenade that Cole had given her, pulled the pin, and rolled it across the table. "Close your eyes!" she screamed. Boom! A blinding white light filled the room, followed by a deafening ringing. "Run!" Isla grabbed Lucian's hand, and for the second time in a week, they were running for their lives. But this time, Isla wasn't the baggage. She was the savior. The world was a blur of white light and ringing silence. The flashbang had done its job, turning the high-stakes poker room of the Sapphire into a chaotic scene of stumbling bodies and shouting men. "Move!" Lucian's voice cut through the ringing in Isla's ears. He gripped her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers so tightly it hurt, anchoring her to reality. They didn't run towards the main exit where the security would be swarming. Lucian kicked open a service door leading to the kitchen. They sprinted past startled chefs and bubbling pots of stock, knocking over a rack of metal pans to create an obstacle behind them. "The car!" Lucien barked into his earpiece as they burst out into the cool, salty air of the loading dock. "Cole, bring the car around back, now!" "I'm 3 minutes out, boss," Cole's voice crackled, sounding strained. "They've got the perimeter locked down. Rossi brought an army." "We don't have 3 minutes," Isla gasped, hiking up the hem of her sequined gown to run. The high heels she had been wearing were long gone, kicked off in the casino hallway. She was running barefoot on the cold concrete. "There," Lucien pointed. A black delivery van was idling near the compactor. The driver was nowhere to be seen, likely smoking a cigarette around the corner. Lucien didn't hesitate. He smashed the window with the butt of his gun, unlocked the door, and hot-wired the ignition with a speed that spoke of a misspent youth before he became a billionaire businessman. "Get in," he ordered. Isla scrambled into the passenger seat just as the service door behind them banged open. 3 of Rossi's men spilled out, weapons raised. Bullets pinged against the metal hull of the van as Lucien stomped on the gas. He reversed hard, clipping one of the shooters with the side mirror, sending him spinning before throwing the van into drive and peeling out of the lot. They tore through the streets of Atlantic City, the neon lights flashing past like streaks of colored lightning. Isla clutched the dashboard, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She looked at Lucien. He was calm, terrifyingly so. His jaw was set in stone, his eyes scanning the mirrors, the road, the shadows. "Are you hit?" he asked, not looking at her. "No," Isla checked herself. "You?" "I'm fine." He took a sharp turn, heading towards the highway. "We lost them." "We didn't lose my father," Isla said, her voice hollow. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold, hard pit in her stomach. "He saw us. He knows." "He doesn't know it was you," Lucien assured her. "The wig, the makeup. He knows," Isla insisted, turning to look at him. "When the flashbang went off, he didn't cover his eyes. He looked right at me. He smiled, Lucien. He smiled." Lucien tightened his grip on the wheel. "If he knows, he's a dead man, walking. Where are we going? The safe house is compromised." "We're not going to a safe house," Lucien said, his eyes darkening. "We're done running. We're going to finish this." "How? We don't know where the drive is." "We don't," Lucien admitted. "But we know where he's going." "Your father is a creature of habit, Isla. You told me he goes to the Sapphire for luck. But where does he go when his luck runs out?" Isla closed her eyes, thinking back to the childhood that now felt like a lie. She remembered the long drives on Sunday afternoons, the way her father would take her to the old shipping yards in Philadelphia, where his own father had worked. He used to say it was the only place where the noise of the world went quiet. "The Navy Yard," Isla whispered. "In Philly. He has an old office there, in one of the decommissioned warehouses. He calls it his think tank." Lucien nodded. "Then that's where we go." The drive to Philadelphia took an hour. The silence in the van was heavy, filled with unspoken fears. Isla watched the city skyline approach, feeling a sense of impending doom. She wasn't just walking into a trap. She was walking into a past to kill it. They abandoned the van 2 blocks away from the shipyard and moved on foot, sticking to the shadows. The Navy Yard was a graveyard of rusted metal and industrial ghosts. Massive cranes loomed overhead like skeletal fingers. "Stay behind me," Lucien whispered, drawing his weapon. They reached warehouse 4B. A faint light flickered in the upper office window. A single black sedan was parked outside, Robert's car. There were no guards, no army. Just the car. "It's too quiet," Lucien murmured. "It's a trap." "I know," Isla said, reaching into the pocket of the oversized coat Lucien had given her from the back of the van. She gripped the spare magazine he had handed her. "But it's the only way to end this." They slipped inside. The warehouse smelled of oil and rot. Their footsteps echoed on the metal grating as they climbed the stairs to the office. Lucien kicked the door open, gun raised. "Drop it!" Lucien shouted. Robert Bennett was sitting behind a rusted metal desk, his hands folded calmly in front of him. He was alone. He looked up, not with fear, but with a weary sort of amusement. "Hello, Lucian," Robert said. Then his gaze shifted to Isla. "Hello, Pumpkin." Isla flinched at the childhood nickname. "Don't call me that." "Why not?" Robert stood up slowly. "It's what I called you when I taught you to ride a bike, when I paid for your college, when I kept a roof over your head, when you sold me to a mafia boss to cover your debts." Isla stepped out from behind Lucian, her own small pistol, taken from the van's glove box, aimed at her father's chest. "When you ordered a hit on the man protecting me." Robert sighed, looking disappointed. "It was business, Isla. Purely business. You were never in danger. Lucian wouldn't damage a valuable asset. And I needed you there. I needed you to gain his trust." "Why?" Lucian asked, stepping forward, his body shielding Isla's. "You have the drive. You don't need us." "That's the irony, isn't it?" Robert chuckled, walking around the desk. "I stole the drive, yes. I have the data. But the encryption, it requires 2 keys. One is a code, which I have. The other," he pointed a finger at Isla, "is genetic." The room went cold. "What?" Isla whispered. "Your mother," Robert said, his voice softening with a twisted sort of reverence. "She was the one who built the system for the Syndicate, years ago, before she died. She didn't trust anyone, not even me. She coded the biometric lock to her own DNA, and since she's gone, you are the only living key." Isla felt the blood drain from her face. "That's why you didn't leave town. That's why you let Lucian take me. You were waiting for the heat to die down, so you could retrieve me and force me to open it." "Force is such an ugly word," Robert said. "I would have shared the profits with you, Isla. We could have lived like kings in the Cayman Islands." "You make me sick," Isla spat. "And you," Robert looked at Lucian, his eyes hardening. "You are in the way." Suddenly, floodlights blinded them from the rafters above. "Now!" Robert yelled. From the shadows of the warehouse catwalks, a dozen men rappelled down. It was an ambush, perfectly timed. Lucian fired, taking down the first man, but there were too many. A heavy net dropped from the ceiling, weighted with lead balls, trapping Lucian and pinning him to the floor. "Lucian!" Isla screamed, turning to help him. Something hard struck the back of her head. The world tilted, greyed out, and then went black. Isla woke to the smell of salt water and rust. Her head throbbed and her hands were zip-tied behind her back. She was on the ground floor of the warehouse. In front of her stood a massive shipping container housing a humming server. To her left, Lucian was chained to a support pillar. He was battered, blood trickling from a cut above his eye, but his gaze was fixed on her with burning intensity. "She's awake," Victor Rossi sneered, stepping into view. Robert Bennett stood next to the rival mob boss, holding a retinal scanner. "Isla," he said, sounding like a disappointed teacher. "We're on a schedule." "Go to hell," Isla rasped. "We don't need your attitude, Pumpkin. We need your eye," Robert explained calmly. "Your mother coded the Syndicate's banking encryption to her own DNA. You are the only living key to unlocking billions." "I won't do it," she said. Robert sighed and pressed a gun against Lucian's kneecap. "Scan it, or I take him apart, piece by piece." Isla looked at Lucian. He shook his head slightly, pleading silently for her not to yield. But she couldn't watch him die. "Okay," she screamed. "I'll do it." Robert smiled, that predatory grin she used to mistake for fatherly love. He held the scanner to her face. A red laser swept her iris. The server beeped. "Access granted." "We're in!" Robert shouted, turning to the screens filling with dollar signs. "It's done, Victor. We're rich." "Excellent," Rossi said, raising his weapon at Lucian. "Now tie up the loose ends." But they had forgotten one thing. In the car, Lucian had slipped a small razor-blade knife into Isla's sleeve. While they watched the money transfer, she had sawed through the plastic ties. Her hands snapped free. Isla didn't run. She grabbed a heavy wrench from a workbench and swung it with all her strength into the open server rack. Sparks rained down as the cooling system exploded. "No!" Robert screamed. "You stupid girl, you burned the money!" "I burned you!" Isla shouted. The distraction gave Lucian the split second he needed. He used the slack in his chains to loop the neck of the nearest guard, using him as a human shield as the others opened fire. He grabbed the guard's weapon, dropped him, and fired 3 shots. 2 guards fell. Rossi turned to run, but Lucian was faster. He put a bullet through Rossi's leg, sending the mob boss crumbling to the floor. Robert Bennett, seeing his empire turn to ash, scrambled up the metal stairs to the warehouse catwalks. "Isla," Lucian said, tossing her his gun. He saw the steel in her eyes. "He's yours." Isla climbed the stairs. Robert was cornered on the narrow walkway, high above the concrete. "Isla, wait," he pleaded, backing away. "I'm your father. We can fix this." "My father died a long time ago," Isla said, raising the gun. "You're just the man who killed him." She didn't aim at him. She aimed at the rusted support cable holding his section of the walkway. Bang! The cable snapped. The metal grating swung down like a trap door. Robert screamed as he fell 20 feet, crashing into a pile of rusted machinery. He didn't move again. Isla lowered the gun. She didn't feel sadness. She felt free. She walked back down to Lucian, collapsing into his arms. "It's over," he whispered, kissing her hair. "The debt is paid." 3 months later. The charity gala at the Met Museum was the event of the season. A black limousine pulled up, and Lucian Blackwood stepped out. He offered his hand to the woman inside. Isla emerged. She wasn't wearing a maid's uniform. She was wearing a gown of deep, blood-red velvet that trailed behind her like a royal train. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was Isla Blackwood now, his wife and equal. "Mrs. Blackwood," a reporter shouted, "is it true you used to work for your husband as a maid?" Isla stopped. The cameras zoomed in. She smiled, a dangerous expression that reminded everyone of the night the Rossi crime family fell. "I didn't work for him," she said smoothly. "I cleaned up his mess, and now I help him run the house." She turned to Lucian. "Where are you going, dressed like that?" he whispered, echoing the words he had snapped at her that first night. Only now, his voice was full of pride. Isla winked. "To rule the city, Mr. Blackwood." They walked into the light, hand in hand, untouchable. And that is how the maid became the queen. Isla didn't just survive the shark tank. She drained the water and took over the castle. Robert Bennett got exactly what he deserved, and Lucian finally found the one thing he couldn't control, and realized he didn't want to. What did you think of that ending? Did Robert deserve a second chance, or was Isla right to drop him? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow, and subscribe for more twisted romances and mafia thrillers. I have a new story coming next week about a billionaire who falls for his bodyguard, and you do not want to miss the hook on that one. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.